getting into the Joe Rogan deal. What he signed with Spotify, basically, according to the Wall Street Journal, it's valued at 100 million. It's a multi-year deal. Joe Rogan is UFC commentator, number one podcast in the world. He's been doing it for some years. This deal with Spotify would basically move him to stop Spotify on September 1st. Like he'd still have some stuff on the YouTube, but his whole library would obviously move to Spotify exclusively. And what's interesting about this is that as the year finishes out, eventually he is gonna be exclusively on Spotify. So Spotify hasn't they haven't even they're still testing out this video material. So his videos will also be on Spotify. That feature is not there yet, but I've seen the demos for it. I think they're trialing it with these two other podcasts, which is very interesting. But you see, Spotify is now making the push to open up their income streams to podcasts. In the past few years, I believe they acquired the Ringer, Gimlet Media, Anchor, and Parcast, which all are podcasting firms. They got them for 600 million, and Apple Podcast is not really making a big move to try to stop this. But the fact that Spotify was able to get the number one podcast in the world, it really changes the game. And since this deal is valued at 100 million, I think you're gonna see a wave of podcasts now looking more towards trying to get a deal of such a big as this, because I believe Joe Budden is also on Spotify. Like this is I think this changes the game, because the Joe Rogan Experience gets like 190 million downloads a month, which is it's insane. So no, I think this really does change the game. And he said that we're going to be working with the same crew, the exact same show. It will be free. You'll just have to get it on Spotify, but it's free in the sense that if you have Spotify, it's free. But obviously, you have to get your Spotify subscription. Since I already have it, it's all good. But he's specifically stated that they're not going to be employees of Spotify. So I think he made that point very clear.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's actually quite interesting. Just looking at the pod as we were talking about, the podcast landscape is changing pretty fast, and Spotify wants to really establish itself as the biggest uh, podcasting platform. And we've seen these changes even just
Mm-hmm.
in their interface, uh, in their user interface. In the past year or year and a half, you've seen they basically built in the podcast feature, which equals now like the music feature, because Spotify used to be about
Mm-hmm.
music and not podcasting, so and they have been trying to integrate podcasting as well, and since they
Mm-hmm.
signed this deal, I believe their stock has gone up 10%, so which is actually
Yeah.
quite a good investment, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really really interesting, because people use, well, in the podcasting business, you would sell your, I suppose, your IP, or you would go try to get a deal with like a bar stool or like a podcasting network or something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
now you can go and get a deal for uh, to be exclusive with a platform, and that also pays. So
Mm-hmm.
it's uh it's great for podcasters, It's just great for
Mm-hmm.
the market and for the creators, because like I you know I suppose, since money is being thrown now behind podcasters, we're going to see more creative ideas and more creative podcasts and better produced ones and those sort of
Mm-hmm.
things. So it's an exciting outlook for sure.
Mm-hmm. And there's been like argument made, like, was this maybe because of the YouTube censorship, etc., etc. But I think for a guy like Joe Rogan, I think everything because it could also be obviously about the money is valued at 100 million for a multi-year deal. I think it's probably a mix of everything, but I think now these major platforms now all have to make a move to keep their creatives where they are, especially podcasts. I think obviously podcast is becoming one of the, I want to say even like most one of the most trusted mediums for people to get their information, and most important medium for people to just find some type of entertainment because it's so integrated, that whole audio aspect, and even some that do the video also to it. It's just, it's the best way to really have a conversation. No longer, I think the days of interviewing like celebrities or athletes, like those 5-10 minutes interviews that go with like network television that go big, it's like people, those things are kind of, those days are about to flee because people are more looking towards, let me see what the person that's getting interviewed, let me see what they're really like. And you don't really get that in a 15-minute interview, but 1 hour, 2 hour conversation, you quickly know who's the person, who they really are. Like I was very impressed. One of my favorite Joe Rogan interviews was with Robert Downey Jr. Like that guy's he's a pretty open book regardless, but during that 2-3 hours, I don't know, I forgot how long it was, but it was so candid, and it's just the podcast genre. That's why they're able to do this, because it's 1 hour, 2 hours, man. You can't fake it for 1 hour, 2 hours. It's just so honest. It's just becoming one of the best mediums for conversations and interviews.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, it's like I really enjoy the format of podcasting because when it's when you're especially when you're talking about these personalities or individuals or just any individual, as we do on our podcast, you get to know the person better when it's a long it's a longer format. The even, and you've seen this, like the format affect even how interviews are conducted. I remember I was
Mm-hmm.
watching an interview on I believe Variety or something, like it on the Variety YouTube channel. It was like the
Oh, I know
I
what you're
might have
talking
it
about. I
wrong, but
love those. I love those interviews. No,
yeah,
you have it right. The
it's
round
like
table.
they have on I don't know how it's called, but it's basically they have on celebrities and they interview each
Mm-hmm.
other, and it's a really long format.
Oh, that one. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I was watching the Scarlett Johansson and Chris Evans one, and
Mm-hmm.
you actually get the impression that you're getting to know them better, right? As they're
Mm-hmm.
talking for like an hour or 15 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like that sitting down for 10-15 minutes and then you have these questions they probably don't even want to answer them. They're
Mm-hmm.
just throwing out answers
Exactly.
to go to the next question. But for podcasting, since it's an hour, that like you're only sitting down when you're interested.
Mm-hmm.
Because
It's like, yeah.
if you're not interested, it's just like it's grueling to sit down for an hour and be
Exact.
uninterested. So,
And also people will see that like in our interview coming up with Daniel Kinube, was a soccer player. We didn't announce it yet, but like when that interview comes out, like you can we talk about this. We laugh a bit about how, because I said like if you look at his post game interviews, he's a soccer player. So you look at the post game interviews. I'm like, you weren't giving them anything. Like it was just straight to the point. Like not anything. And then they would ask him about game day, how did it go? Like he didn't give them anything. But you look at when we had the conversation with him about how did that professional debut go, we just really, it's if like when you listen to it, you'll feel very immersed into the experience. He talks about how he's stressed, how he's looking around, he sees his family. You cannot get that when you have these quick interviews with the press. It's not the same. So I think podcasting is it's very much on the upward trajectory for sure.
yeah.